All right, one of the things that I wanted to do in our series on how to read the Bible as literature is to go through some of the major figures of speech that are used in the Bible. So, a figure of speech is uh, a deviation from ordinary language, and it's done for rhetorical effect. You could think of it as the spice that is put into language. If all language was quite literally only description, you could never communicate the joy or the wonder or the horror of what it is you're looking at. You would just be trying to describe in literal terms what it is. So we use figures of speech because we want to communicate the emotion, the passion. So we're going to speak clearly to the reader, but we're also going to inject emotion, whether good or bad, so that the reader can understand not only what we're trying to say, but how we feel about what it is we're trying to say. So the first figure of speech that we're going to take a look at is uh, three of them actually that are related to each other: simile, metaphor, and hypocatastasis. Um, so those three are comparisons of one thing to another, and the other thing is a different sort of thing. So we're just trying to make the description more emphatic, more vivid. So we have these three together. The simile makes the comparison between unlike things using like or as to form the comparison. This is like that. This is, and then they would use the word as. So simile uses one of those two words to invite the comparison. Metaphor invites the comparison, but it doesn't use those two words. It just says this thing is that thing. And then your understanding, because you know they're unlike objects, that there is a comparison that is being made. Hypocatastasis goes one step farther. It makes the comparison between two unlike things, but it only actually mentions one of them. The other is implied. So let me show you how those three work out. A simile is like this: brave as a lion, or crazy like a fox. See, it's explicit. The comparison is as or like, and you can't miss it. So biblical examples would be in Psalm 1. The wise person is said to be like a tree planted by springs of water. And we are, because of our sinful nature, we are described as sheep going astray. See the as, see the like. That's the explicit comparison that a simile is inviting us to. The next one is metaphor. This one states that one thing is another thing to make the comparison. So, for example, if a person says he is an elephant in a china shop, doesn't mean he's literally an elephant. He is a gazelle in track and field doesn't mean he is literally a gazelle. But you're learning, you figure out the point of comparison, the speed or the being too big to fit in something so small. You know what the comparison is, and so, in biblical examples, it says in Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd." Um, Jesus says, "I am the bread of life." These are metaphors, and they're inviting that comparison. We don't always. This is where we get into a little bit of trouble theologically. Great debate came up in the Reformation, most notably between Luther and Ulrich Zwingli, about what Jesus meant when he said, "This is my body." So Luther maintained that the phrase was a quite literal expression, that the bread that Jesus was holding was, in at least a spiritual sense, the very presence of the body of Christ. And so he would stand firm on the idea that when Jesus said, "This is my body," he means his body. Zwingli said, no, it's a metaphor that Jesus is inviting us to use the one thing as a token or a symbol of what is being represented, which so the body of Christ is being represented, and the token or the symbol is an unlike thing, but it's there to help us to understand what communion is all about. So Is it a metaphor or is it not? See whole big church divisions happen on how we interpret these figures of speech. The third comparison between unlike things is the hypocatastasis. And this is a comparison, but only one of them is actually mentioned. And you can see how it packs a bigger punch. A simile could say, because you are really good at what you do, and you might have just discovered and solved something that people were having trouble with. And so somebody might say to you, you are like a rock star. Like you're gifted. This is a great thing that you've just done. That's a simile. Metaphor would take out the like or the as and say, you are a rock star. Hypocatastasis would take it one step farther and look at you and go, rock star. Do you see how that goes? So hypocatastasis is going to drop out the other side of the comparison, and you just have to infer it. We could see a couple of biblical examples with he laid hold of the dragon. Satan is not mentioned, but there is the comparison between the enemy of our souls and a literal dragon. And then we have the phrase where Jesus is described but not mentioned. He's simply referred to as the shepherd and overseer of our souls. Do you see that? So that's hypocatastasis. So simile uses like or as. Metaphor just says this is the other thing, and you're left to interpret what the relationship is between those two unlike things. Hypocatastasis says the one thing, and you have to guess what the other thing is and then make the comparison. Incredibly, we have minds that do that automatically without us hardly even thinking about the fact that a figure of speech is being employed. So there we are. If you want to learn more about figures of speech, I would suggest an old classic, E.W. Bullinger's Figures of Speech Used in the Bible. It lists, it's like a Strong's thesaurus. It takes you to major figures of speech used in the Bible, and you're able to check them out and understand what the figures of speech are and where they're located. And then, if you get a chance, much of what we're doing in this series is being drawn from Leland Ryken's Reading the Bible as Literature series. So I invite you to check that out. It's a more recent publication from Lexham Press. So thanks for hanging out. We'll do some more figures of speech in just a little bit.